So today's sewing project is going to be the smooth sailing blouse from Wearing History. This is a really great multi-size 1930s separates patterns. It's got a blouse, trousers, and a shorts pattern. And today we're going to be making the blouse. Got my instructions here. First, so the fabric I have is this really nice cotton lawn. It's got this super cute strawberry and blossom print on it, and it's on kind of a, it's not really a mustardy yellow, it's kind of more of an orangey yellow. I don't know what shade of yellow this is, but I love wearing yellow, and it's also got fruit on it, so that's what we're going to be making. So I've already gone ahead and cut everything out, made some pattern adjustments, as you can see. But you know, my birds like to come on to my patterns and chew on the pins and take them to go and leave them for me to find all over the house. So just leave that like so. So there's no tempting bird toys in the sewing area. So the first thing that I'm going to be doing here is marking the darts that I'm going to be making on the blouse. So you can see I am putting pins through the patterns along the lines. There's a couple of different lines there for the different sizes. They're all color coded. And then I'm just going to take some chalk and I am marking where each pin is, making sure to do both sides of the fabric here because I need to make the dart on each side. And just a little rub of chalk. I'm kind of down to a small nub. I need to get some more Taylor's chalk, but I'm going to just mark those here. And we're going to take this over to the table to actually connect those dots to make the lines to sew along. I like to do the pins on the ironing board because I can pin into it and then draw the lines over here on a firmer surface because I feel like the lines draw a lot better. And then this will just make a nice guide for pinning and sewing these little darts on the blouse back. Then I'm just going to pop over here to my serger and serge all the edges I want finished. Been sewing long enough that I know places that I either don't need to serge or I will serge later on in the process. But I enjoy serging because it is a quick and easy and very durable seam finish. And I have this really nice vintage serger that is an absolute beast and makes some really nice serge seams. Once everything's all serged, I'm going to come back over to the ironing board and go ahead and pin up the little darts here we just made. And just making sure to match the lines on both sides so that everything's going to line up nice and neatly when I go to sew it. I'm going to pop over here to the sewing machine, start with a little back stitch, and of course I forgot to get my pin cushion here, and then sew along the two darts we have on the back here of the blouse. And then when I get to the end, you'll see me go ahead and do another back stitch, and then I'll pop over and do the other side. And then once I'm done with those, I'm going to add 2 rows of gathering stitches to the top of this back. I will pull out the bobbin thread so I'll have something to pull on when I go to do the gathers. But I'm just going to run 2 parallel rows of long stitches along here. This will get gathered up to the back yoke, so it'll have kind of a nice puffed effect on there. And then here we go, the second row, just about 1/4 of an inch away from the first, so we get nice, pretty, even gathers. So I'm going to pop over here back to the ironing board and give these a nice press. I'm going to press both of these towards the center with some nice steam to make it nice and crisp in this lovely cotton. And then off camera, I also went ahead and did these same steps on the blouse fronts. We've got one of these little darts on each side, and also at the gathering where it's going to attach to the front yoke. Then I'm going to come over here and start working on the pockets. I'll do a narrow, about 1/4 inch hem. I just folded over however much the serging was. I'm going to stitch that. And then I will fold over the rest of the hem allowance and sew 1/2 inch on each side through that hem allowance, which will make a nice clean finish on the top of the pockets. Back over at the ironing table, I'm going to take these pinking shears to trim the excess seam allowance here off of the underlap of the pocket. These little zigzaggy scissors will provide a really nice seam finish. This was very popular in the mid-century before home sergers became a thing, and it works great for closely woven fabrics. And then I have this little hair chopstick, which I'm using as a point turner to make sure that the corners are nice and crisp. I don't wear these in my hair anymore. I've had this since middle school, and I just don't think wearing it is a great way to honor any of the wonderful cultures that use chopsticks as silverware, but it works great for this purposes. And I'm just going to press under 1/2 inch the other edges of this pocket. I got a little seam gauge there that I'm using to measure, and then just iron under each of the different edges, and I'm going to do this for both pockets. So off camera, I went ahead and slip stitched the hem of the pocket, and then also top stitched on a row of rickrack just to kind of make the pocket stand out a little bit more. It's kind of a busy print, and I wanted to give a little bit of emphasis to the pocket. And now I am going ahead and top stitching the pocket onto the front of the blouse. This is easiest to do when the blouse piece is still fairly flat and relatively detached from the rest of the garment. You can see I am just using the edge of the presser foot to give a nice even top stitch, and ends up being about 1/4 inch. And then every time I get to a corner, I will stop and then lift the presser foot and pivot like I'm about to do right here. Lift, pivot, move the pin, and then do it again. And so I'm doing a nice slow speed on my machine so I can do really nice, beautiful, even top stitching. This is something that comes with practice, and I still like to go quite slowly when I do it. But I'm going to go ahead and attach a pocket to each side of the blouse front. And then I'll have 2 very cute little pockets on my blouse. I ended up not liking the green top stitching thread that I used on the first pocket, so I'm just going to pull out my seam ripper and redo that one in white top stitching, which you can see here, and looks much nicer than the green. So now it's time to go ahead and attach that back piece to the back yoke here. I'm going to go ahead and mark the center of the back yoke and the center of the back yoke piece so I can line those up nicely when I gather them. I'm going to go ahead and separate my threads and pull on that back thread of those basting stitches to make some nice looking gathers. I tend to err in the side of over gathering, which is I find easier to let loose rather than not having enough gathers when you go to pin and then having to tighten it up. So I tend to do a fairly tight gather here, and then I'll go ahead and start lining up that yoke piece in the middle and then on each end of the blouse back. And then once I have those bits pinned together, I will ease out the gathers until they're the correct length on either side. And then I will start going in and making sure the gathers look nice and even, and there's not kind of any weird bunching or gaps in the gathers, and that'll just make it look a little bit nicer when I go to actually sew these two pieces together. So I went ahead and did the same thing for the two front pieces, gathered them and then pinned them to the front yokes, and then I'm going to come over to the sewing machine and actually sew all of these pieces together. See, I am going over the gathers and then removing the pins as I go along so that I keep everything nice and even where I have the nice spread of the gathers. And then when I'm done, I'll have the back attached to the back yoke and each of the front pieces attached to the front yokes. Then we'll pop back over to the ironing board to give everything a real nice press. I like to press from the wrong side and then flip it over and press to the right side. I'm going to be top stitching all of these seams, so I want to make sure that the front side is pressed nice and crisply before that step.
So I made some decent progress last night, but then I started making mistakes and I decided it was a good time to stop for the day. So let's see what I got done. So we have the bodice piece, I've got the yoke on, got the pocket on, and I've got the tucks done. So that both of the fronts are done. And then the back is attached to the yoke. And again, we have some tucks. And this is the part that I oopsed last night. So there's my first yoke. And yeah, I accidentally cut a hole in it when I was trimming my threads. So I had a bunch more fabric. I just unpicked it, cut a new one, and sewed it on. Decided to call it a day. So the next thing on the docket to do is top stitching on the front and back yokes, and then we can start putting this together. Okay, so we've made it to day 3, 4, I'm not entirely sure, of working on this project. And it's Saturday, which means I will hopefully get a lot of stuff done today. Although it's already 10 o'clock and I haven't actually sewn anything yet. But I did manage a little bit of sewing one day before work. So I got the top stitching done on the yoke pieces. So we're ready to start assembling the blouse. And I also did a fabric store run to hopefully make sure I got all the notions that I need to finish up this project. And hopefully for the next couple of projects, so I don't have to keep running to the store for the one thing that I run out of because I thought I had some, and I forget that my stash is not as massive as it used to be. So let's go ahead and get sewing. So the first thing I have to do today is dig out my pattern piece for the yoke and mark some stuff on my yoke piece, which are already attached to the blouse pieces, because I'm a lazy seamstress and I don't like to mark things unless it's absolutely necessary. Which means fairly regularly I decide something is absolutely necessary and then determine later that it is absolutely necessary and I have to go back and mark it. So yeah, I'm gonna do that so I can keep going. Progress update time. So I have the two fronts attached to the back. And then I went ahead and made the little collar. I decided to do some top stitching on there. I thought about also adding a little bit of rickrack around the collar like I have on the pockets, but didn't have enough. And this print is very loud and busy already. This is already a little bit outside of my comfort zone, so I decided I'll just do the pockets, and then I just did top stitching on the collar to match with the little yoke. And then I finished the little neckline with some plaid bias tape. I thought that would look cute with the strawberries does kind of show through a little bit on the back. I don't know if you can tell, but in person you can kind of see underneath there where the black is, but it's going to be under the collar, so nobody's ever going to see it. And it looks really cute on the inside. And I have a bunch more of this bias tape, so I think I'm also going to use it on the hem, which I haven't done yet. So the next thing to do, according to the pattern instructions, is to make buttons, or to make buttonholes and attach buttons, which I'm not going to do because my buttons haven't gotten here yet, and the two are slightly different sizes, so I'm just going to hold off on that. It's going to move on to the sleeves. So I've gone ahead and serged those, and they will get sewn up, and some gathering stitches on the top because these are going to be more poofy sleeves. And then I also have cuffs to assemble on there. You can see these cuffs are actually cut on the bias. So the green line is at a diagonal, so that's going to give them a little bit of stretch, so that the sleeve can be kind of like tight enough to hold the poof up, but also stretch because, you know, people have biceps and they need to move. So yeah, I think if I read the instructions correctly that I shouldn't need to serge anything on the cuffs because everything should be contained. But you know, if that turns out to not be true, I'll just wrangle it in the serger partway constructed.
So I sewed these side seams of the cuff and the sleeve, and then I sewed the two of them together, and we're going to just give everything a nice little press here and make it look nice and sharp. Then I'm going to flip the sleeve inside out so I can press under the hem of the cuff. Like everything else, we've got a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm just going to fold over a 1/2 inch on my little seam gauge so that I can measure that, and then press all the way around the sleeve cuff here so that we have a nice turned under 1/2 inch all the way around. Once that's pressed, I'm going to go ahead and fold the cuff up so that that folded edge meets up with the seam where the sleeve and cuff meet. Then I'll give that a quick press and then slip stitch that all the way around so it's nice and secure.
So I got my two sleeves made up. We got some gathering stitches on the top for the puff, and then we have the cuff attached, and it's all finished nicely on the inside, no raw edges. And I added a little bit of top stitching. Let's go with the other top stitching details. I also did my shoulder adjustment. I have very narrow shoulders, so in order to have the shoulder seam actually sit on my shoulder and not like hang down my arm, I have to do a little bit of a narrow shoulder adjustment. So I did that and then serged around the armhole. So I'm ready to insert the sleeves. So the sleeve will go in, and then the top part will be gathered down to fit the armhole, and that'll make it all nice and puffy. So hopefully this will go in pretty easily. A gathered sleeve is a lot easier to set in than one you're trying to do that's smooth. That requires a lot of more fiddling. But sleeves are hard, so you never know when a sleeve will decide to be a pain in the butt. So that's next.
So I went ahead and gathered up that sleeve head and then pinned it into the arm side, making sure that everything matched up nice and neat and there wasn't going to be anywhere where there was any weird issues with the fabric. And then I'm going to go ahead and sew that on my machine. You can see that there's a part of my machine that actually comes off so that the area to put the fabric around is narrower, which is great for something like sleeves where you have to have the hole go around the machine. And then I'm just going to stitch slowly around, making sure to take the time to check that the 2 layers of fabric are still lining up nicely and neatly. I find that sleeves tend to turn out better if I just take my time with them as opposed to trying to rush in to get them in. That tends to lead to more mistakes for me personally.
All right, so we're in the home stretch for the blouse. Yay! I had to kind of put it on hold because I ordered 2 different sets of buttons off of Etsy, and then I had to wait for them to get here. And I didn't order them far enough in advance that they would arrive promptly when I needed them. So that's okay. I need to remember to order those types of things further ahead of time. But let me go ahead and show you where the blouse. Okay, so I have the blouse mostly complete. I did a try on and I was really happy with the fit after I got the sleeves and the cuff and everything on, except I hated the pockets. So they gone. So I decided it was too much with the puffy sleeves and the novelty print and then the pockets and then the rickrack on the pockets. Then I was gonna have contrasting buttons. So then what was left was buttons and buttonholes. And I ended up with some red buttons and some white buttons, and I think I'm gonna go with the red ones. Luckily, they both fit through the same size buttonhole, so if I put the red ones on and I decide I don't like it, I can take them off and put the white ones on. And I did the buttonholes. Yay! Which I did not film because I find making machine buttonholes to be a very stress-inducing experience. Sometimes my machine makes beautiful buttonholes and sometimes it does not. I think I finally figured out the trick to getting it to make beautiful buttonholes, and it's been working, but it still makes me a little anxious. I did a tester one first on a little scrap. That's always a great thing to do. I didn't interface this one, but I do recommend having the same number of layers as you're going to have in your actual garment to kind of test out your machine buttonhole. Make sure your machine plays nicely. I did feel like my machine would probably play nicely with this fabric and the weight of interfacing that I picked, but I have occasionally put in a few too many layers on my final garment and then found out later that my machine didn't like it and had to rip it out and take the interfacing out, and it was a hot mess. So practice buttonhole for the win. So I'm gonna go try this on and see where the buttons need to go. I do always mark the buttonhole location on both sides. So I already took the pins out on this side because I was making the buttonholes, and then I have these ones over here, but I like to use a button placket as a way to kind of tweak the fit if the fit needs to be massaged in any part of the blouse. But yeah, then we'll be done except for any last little trimming of the threads. They gone. It was too much with the puffy sleeves and the busy novelty print and then the pocket and the rickrack. Keat! So I decided Keat!